In this episode, we head out to the GN in 1970 to see how the operations went, good and bad. We had trains moving, so that's good. We also take a look at how to weather the roof of a freight car.
I thought we already covered that.
I won't leave this much on the model itself.
Then we go and check out a guy that went LED crazy. So kick back, roll an axle, and maybe you'll accidentally learn something on this episode of the GN in 1970.
70s.
Morning of operations, it's time to head out to the GN in 1970. Hey, here's an error I've never seen in JMRI before. And when do you get to see it?
Hey, you bet. The morning of operations.
And this is what your face looks like when the crew shows up to operate, and, well,
Things have gone ass over tea kettle.
what we end up doing with the old error on JMRI, I end up loading the backup, and the backup was a few weeks old, so some cars have been moved and weren't in the right spots, but nonetheless, I had some switch lists printed out. The crew itself was understanding, and well, we ended up going forward anyways. And if you haven't met this crew, it's the crew of the Crossing Gate podcast.
We'll let Tom introduce these characters.
Dan Dosa,
Hey guys.
Greg Dahl,
Hello.
David Hamilton,
Howdy.
Mr. Joe Binish,
Good evening.
and Mike Jordan.
Hello.
Now, if you've never heard of the Crossing Gate podcast or don't even know what a podcast is, you can grab your computer that doubles as a communication device and look up the Crossing Gate. You can type it into Google, you can type it into Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever streaming platforms are out there. But nonetheless,
It's a great pod.
Now, I still hurdle is JMRI and Decoder Pro, but once again, I go to my friends, and I'm very good at taking notes.
and that's why Tom is our dispatcher of the day as well as note taker. The whole crew is here to kind of vet the railroad itself. This is the first time the GN in 1970 has had someone other than myself or Colin dispatch. Greg's a little perplexed about that. My dad's a little unsure. And the other two guys, well, they're just ready to run. Dan Dosa on the left is going to be running Lindale. Greg is up working Wilmer. The feedback Dan gave us on the Rapido SW1200,
It worked well for him.
it did run into a little bit of an issue, but we'll cover that in a later episode. Here we do have Joe working Union on the left and Dave working Wayzata on the right. One bit of feedback that Joe did provide: less cars in your yard as well as a good place to hide your switch list to kind of tuck it out of the way. As you can see, he does what we do often, and that's set it on the railroad. If we can prevent it, we'll try to do so. And Dave, he's running train 360, which is the local.
He's crushing it.
We're going to take a look at his train actually run the line in just a little bit. First, we want to see what these two guys are confused about. We've got the switch list out. Mike and my dad try to sift through where cars are going, and well, hopefully they get that dialed in.
Inside info,
The switch list that Mike ended up being handed was an old switch list.
that doesn't help.
We got Greg up here in Wilmer. He's looking over the railroad, trying to figure out why a train won't run on track 4. And then Dave, well, he's a little frustrated. We said we'd take a look at his train, but it's being held up.
By the dispatcher who's taking his photo at the moment.
It's time for a quiz.
The Great Northern's production model SW1200s were delivered from LaGrange
Back outside again.
between February and May of 1957. They were the first switchers delivered without the extended railroad Roman lettering style. Do you know how many production SW1200s the GN ordered in 1957? Is it A, 4, B, 5, C, 6, or D, 10? We'll find out if your guess was right later in this episode. Here's Dave's train leaving the siding. This is train 360 that runs from Union to Wilmer and back. It is one of the best jobs to have because you get to see the whole railroad. And one thing that's nice, we can set it up in 2 different ways. We can set it up in JMRI so we actually have a heavy train as well as a light train. Those are just 2 different workloads. The amount of work that an operator has to do, if he's inexperienced, we'll go light. If he's experienced like Dave, we'll go with heavy. Now you might ask,
How do you set it up in JMRI to run these light or heavy trains?
let's take a look. For the non-JMRI user out there, this is going to take less than 30 seconds. We're looking at the heavy and light local. How do you build one? Well, first of all, you need 2 trains. Then you go into the train. In this case, it's heavy. Look at the locations you're going to be going to. Notice that I've got them all checked, so it's going to be stopping more frequently. And if I swing over to the light train is obviously going to have less towns to stop in. And that's what lightens the load. Less places to stop, less cars to drop, less cars to pick up, making things a lot easier. That is, the light and heavy trains on JMRI. Told you to keep it under 30 seconds.
Well, it felt like 36 seconds.
Well, we had another operator join us, Mr. Eric Boone, working East Union. This position is one we've always wanted. In this application, it should help Joe Binish.
The key word is should.
In Joe's defense, the union job is one of the most difficult as well as complex. Note, we've even added a third guy to assist working in union. Now, that job that works along the back tracks here is called the union trim. It doesn't always get ran, so with that, usually it gets kicked off and we work on it at another time. But adding these additional operators has allowed that, and well, we're thankful that there's enough space because this is what Joe was dealing with.
You're gonna have to wait. I'm plugged up.
This is actually a photo from after the session when we audited the railroad, but nonetheless, Joe defended the chaos that he had going on in Union.
I think he actually handled it well.
And Mr. Mike Jordan, well, he was the mainline guy. Didn't seem to have any problems.
At least that he told us.
And as for the layout owner, well,
I think the expression speaks for itself.
there are growing pains that a railroad has to go through, but bringing in experienced operators is huge. They provide great feedback, and well, you can go back into your railroad and start looking at some of the issues that some of the operators might have found.
Well, since Greg left, we might as well record the fact that the switch works just fine.
If you're ever looking for gremlins on your railroad, the best way to find them is invite people over. As you can see, the switch is working just fine, but I continued to dig to try to find the issue because I was there when Greg did have some of the problems. It came down to this electrofrog, that there wasn't a gapped insulation here, so obviously you can see we cut it. It did get insulated, and well, hopefully that takes care of the issue. Another issue we ran into, and I'm actually going to ask you guys, anybody viewing this that knows the pulsating action that you can see, we'd like to eliminate that. If you know how, let us know. These are factory Athearn Genesis with Tsunami sound.
Attempting
To weather the prototype.
We've looked at this CBQ PS4000 in the past, and it has a blotchy looking roof. Well, here's another technique to be able to create that look, and it's with accent washes, as well as a colored pencil. You look at it and say,
I don't know how to use either of those.
it's fairly straightforward. I consider these things somewhat idiot-proof.
As long as you don't do something stupid.
All right, just to give a quick look at the use of the colored pencils as well as the washes, what I'm doing here is just highlighting the edge because a lot of buildup happens along the edge, and this isn't necessarily rust. A lot of times it's just built up dirt, sometimes excess flour or whatever commodities in the car, and it's built up on the edge. Since the PS4000 is a flat roofed car, or fairly flat, a lot of the stuff is still going to run towards the edge, but you're going to have areas of puddling. I'm just knocking the hatches and the latches just to give them a little bit of wear and tear. Now note that what you're seeing here is not going to be the end product. What I'm doing is laying down the color so I have something to work with when I use the wash again. I just recently washed this, so it's still a little damp, and that's nice because it ends up allowing the pencil to kind of soften and turns it into a mud of sorts. But our end goal here is going to be coming back with the wash. If you want to show a little wear on the hatch, you can just run it across the top of the hatch and lightly go over it again with the wash when that time comes. But as you can see here, I'm adding more dirt or mud kind of into the corner. I won't leave this much on the model itself. I'm coming in with the wash now to be able to lighten that. And what you'll see here is I do kind of scrub away at it. So I'm not going to leave that much colored pencil there. I'm just kind of pushing it around with the brush. Again, this stuff is going to dissipate and evaporate, so it looks like you're putting it on heavy, and in reality, it'll dry a lot lighter. So as we move along, I'm just kind of moving that colored pencil around, using the applicator or the brush that comes with the Tamiya washes, and I think you end up getting a decent effect. Again, working the hatch. You're looking at the hatch in the areas where you kind of wore it out. If you wipe too much off or you wash too much off, you can come back in again with the colored pencil and add it again. So just making sure I get coverage all the way around the car. Again, flat roof car. I'm just pushing the colored pencil material kind of around, and you can see it a little bit better than what you can see in the video here, but you're moving the wash around to be able to just kind of carry the debris around. And what's happening is that the colored pencil is leaving little bits and pieces of that material, which looks like dirt or debris, and then the wash kind of sucks up around it, and it gives it kind of a nice kind of a faded effect around the dirt spot or the high spot where the colored pencil was. So I do accelerate the drying process by using a hairdryer. So I will use a hairdryer to be able to speed up the drying time of this. A lot of times I like to let it dry naturally, but the hair dryer just helps speed it up a little bit more. Before I do use the hair dryer, I'm going in and just lightly just touching, and you can see I just leave little dots and spots around on the top of the car. That could be a little hunk of flour, it could be a little chip in the paint, or whatever you might want to refer to it as, but the tops of these cars have a little bit of grit to them. Now this car was built in 1964, so I'm in 1985. I've got about 20 years worth of life on this car, so that's going to end up looking a lot more tired than a car that might only be 5-6 years old. If it is only 5-6 years old, focus on just the light touches. I did look at the roofs of like some CB&Q cars of the PS4000 series, and it appears that a lot of debris or stuff that was supposed to be put into the car ends up on the roof of the car, and eventually over time that stuff just kind of gets dirty and nasty. So that's what you kind of experience. Here's where I'm using the hair dryer, and then this is the end result. As you can see, you don't see that the coloring looks so much like coloring. It's kind of more of a blend between the wash and the colored pencil. So you get a decent effect. It's just kind of a nice tool to have in your arsenal, so hopefully this helps.
Here's a look at the M&S car. The roof has been completed. The entire car was actually done with just the colored pencil and washes, and I do this just to kind of see what does a car look like if you only use certain techniques. Of course, I highly encourage multiple techniques to be able to kind of set yourself up to make it look as close as you can to the prototype. If your game of Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Mo took you to B5, you'd have the correct answer. Numbers 29 to 33 were ordered from EMD. The GN did have an SW1200 number 100, which would have made it 6, and if you guessed C, then technically
You're still wrong.
because that was part of a 1955 rebuild. You'll note, it does not have MU cables. And if you really want to get into the nitty-gritty, it is equipped with the standard AAR Type A switcher trucks.
Doesn't help me. Trucks are trucks in my world.
Modeler highlights with Mike Boushley. How far is too far?
As a 1/87 scale vehicle modeler, I thought it was too cool to see this taxi police car combo. It was done by Mike, and I thought, you know what? This guy does some cool stuff. And does he ever? If you want to dive into details and a lot of oddities within a structure, check out the stuff Mike does. The majority of the pieces he creates are from just scratch styrene or stock styrene. As you can see here, a pallet rack, something very simple, very distinct. It's got some titchy barrels on it, but you put that into a building,
And boom, you got yourself a nice looking structure.
it adds character. He puts the American flag on the wall, adds a little bit of element and detail into the trash cans. You got a guy sweeping. I mean, come on. This guy's got to clean up some mess. When it comes down to the vehicles and details, he doesn't have it just interior, he brings it to the exterior as well. This is just a little scene that he has next to a home, person mowing their lawn, you got the garbage cans, a lot of little details. It's that integration of the manufactured and some of your scratch-built elements. Like this sign, any of you truckers, you're probably familiar with the CAT certified scales. Now where Mike starts to get certified crazy is in the LED world. If you look at the areas where he adds LEDs, it adds just a little accent, and boy does it say a lot. I'm just going to let you kick back, dial in, and see all the scratch building as well as LEDs that he adds to stuff that, well, makes it pretty cool.
Viewed her through the doorway. I couldn't believe my eyes. She was standing by the stop sign, fixing to hitch a ride. Dressed to the nines, curving all those lines. You ain't got the time for me. Still taking this chance, might return a glance. Stop me if you can.
Talk about diving into the nitty-gritty.
Nitty-gritty.
If anybody wants to look at doing details, be inspired by a guy like Mike.
Keep up the great work, Mike. 70s.
Remember to please like, tag, share, and follow, as well as subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And if you'd like to see the hobby grow, a simple click goes a long way.
Thanks for watching.
You done shoot about as good as you model.
All right, here's Colin coming at you for the question of the week. I can answer your question about that shampoo and conditioner. I don't use either. I use a bar of soap to wash my hair. And as for the golden spike on the GN in 1970, there's actually two of them. One was in 1996, and the other, well, 1999. We did a western expansion to Wilmer. And being a former engineer, well, I keep track of that information. And that's Cullen answering the questions of the week.
Hopefully you enjoyed the content of this episode. If you want to see more, you can check out more episodes of the GN in 1970, as well as Sue the Milwaukee Road. You can see a tour of the GN in 1970 and even a few other layout tours. Nonetheless, check out the content and hopefully you enjoy that as well as future episodes. Thanks for watching.